Hey, my name is Anisha Patel, and I'm obsessed with all things career development. Whether that's navigating your professional journey, gaining clarity, or building the confidence to reach your goals, I'm here to support you in crafting your roadmap to success. I've grown a podcast that has reached thousands of people across the globe. I'm growing an online business, and I'm stepping outside of my 9-to-5 to build a career of my dreams. I've walked the path of transformation myself, and now I'm here to share insights, strategies, and stories to help you carve out a career that you love, or even a podcast you've been dreaming of creating, but you've not taken the leap to start yet. If you want to connect with me in between podcast episodes, I share my personal career insights and behind-the-scenes stories with my newsletter community, which you can join using the link in the show notes. This is the Pharmacist Diaries podcast. Wow. Pharmacist Diaries is officially live on YouTube. This is incredibly exciting for me. I'm so used to doing podcasts in person, face-to-face in my home, but as you can see, I have moved house. I am living in a new location, and we are officially live online, which is really cool. And I'm really excited for this new series that I am starting because I have finished 6 months of pharmacy student content, which I was really, really excited about. I've been looking forward to showcasing the roles of pharmacy students, what they've been doing, what they have been learning, how they've been getting involved with different internships. And that series has been such a popular series for my listeners and my audience. And so many new people have found me, which is really, really cool. But I am so excited to get back to pharmacist content and really, really excited for a pivot. So the next 6 months, I am pivoting to talk more about non-traditional pharmacy roles. Something that really excites me because I have now officially become a non-traditional pharmacist, one who started in a very traditional hospital pharmacy pathway. I've explored academia, I've worked abroad. But the podcast has really helped me to understand that our skill set and what we train to do in a traditional pharmacy school environment is really setting us up for so many other things. And if you follow Jamie Wilkie on LinkedIn, she's an incredible pharmacist by background. She's the Misfit PharmD, and she's very much known for talking about non-traditional PharmDs and what they can do with their careers, but she also focuses on pharmacists from all over the globe and what you can do and achieve. And she does these incredible newsletters every week that showcases pharmacists from all over the world, but mainly in the US, but all over the world, around how you can pivot into these different roles. And I've always craved to see more video content. And I asked her the question that, hey, Jamie, as my friend and my business BFF, why are you not doing video content? And instead of waiting for her to do it, I said to her, let's collaborate. Let's actually turn these newsletters into video content. So the next 6 months, we are focusing specifically on roles that are non-traditional, but we're going to talk about what they do, how much money they earn, how to apply for them, how to get into them, how to utilize those skills and transition from one place to another. And I have 12 amazing guests lined up. So today is day 1, and I have Adam Quicaro on the podcast today. And I'm really excited to introduce him. I'm also really excited to just get into this conversation, and you guys can chat, you can send us messages, you have a Q&A at the end, so there's lots of opportunity to get your questions answered live, which is so different to what I'm used to. But let's say hi to Adam and let's get you introduced onto this episode and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, Anisha. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here today. I've seen your content on LinkedIn. I've seen some of your YouTube episodes, and really thrilled to be part of this new series that you're launching today. I'm a pharmacist by training, as your guests saw. I currently live and went to school in Boston, Massachusetts. Right now, I am at a company called Alexion Pharmaceuticals, which is the rare disease arm of AstraZeneca. And I work in clinical development, focusing on late stage development of life-saving products for patients with rare diseases. More specifically, phase 2, phase 3, but I also am involved in some non-clinical, preclinical, as well as phase 1 studies as well.
So I guess start the episode by telling us a little bit, and this is how I always do my episodes, is tell us a little bit about why you became a pharmacist in the first place and link it to this pathway. Like, what did you expect that you were going to do when you traditionally went through your PharmD course, and what you thought you were going to do when you graduated from pharmacy school, and how did you make that pivot into a non-traditional career?
Sure thing. It was definitely an intertwining journey, and there was no answer that came to me at once. It was definitely a cultivation of thoughts over time, and ideas, inspirations from my family and my network. In my family, I have a lot of healthcare practitioners, a lot of nurses. My mother, my uncle, my aunt, my grandfather was even a medic in the Air Force, the U.S. Air Force. And so, as a young child, I was definitely attracted to the healthcare space and the body and all the fascination that comes with it. And as I started going through my coursework prior to college, I definitely was able to dive deeper into the more advanced biology and neuroscience courses, which was nice. And so at that time, I figured pharmacy seems like a good fit, but I want to make sure. And so I was fortunate enough to have a job in high school at a local independent mom and pop pharmacy. And it was there that I was falling in love with the art of pharmacy itself, seeing all these patients come after physician visits or other sort of healthcare clinic visits and having discussions with the local pharmacist about the medications that they're taking, their road to rehabilitation, and having this holistic approach, not just the medication, but how you can have lifestyle changes and whatnot to go on your journey and go back to better quality of life and health. And so in that time, I said, yeah, pharmacy school sounds like a great idea. So I started applying. I was fortunate enough to get into the accelerated program at the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy here in Boston. And once I started getting more hands-on training, I was sure that this is my solidified path. Interestingly enough, my first career aspiration or goal, probably around the second or third year of my pharmacy studies, was to own an independent pharmacy and have a holistic blend of both the Eastern and Western medicine, to try and bring that together in a community where I thought there was maybe a need for that. But I started to see a lot of the hurdles that came with owning an independent pharmacy, at least here in the States, and decided to not go that route. And so I had to, again, dive deeper into my passion and my interests. And I know I love the art of pharmacy. I want to help people. I love the body, etc. But what can I do now? And so I thought really far back into my childhood, and I saw that my father, who's an engineer, always tinkering with things, creating things, developing new things, was intriguing to me. I had, when I was a child, a mock lab where I would create and invent things, and I had this desire to invent and create and develop. And so when I saw that deep inside of me, and I also saw in the pharmacy that I was working at, constantly reading through the prescribing labels and looking at the pharmacology section, the dosage, stability, all these really cool sections that are just jam packed with data. I wanted to know, how is this created? Like, where is all this clinical knowledge and data discovery coming from? Sure enough, I was able to find the pharmaceutical industry and how there's so much to unpack there about how pharmacists could be involved in that. And so I started preparing myself in pharmacy school for getting a fellowship and getting involved in the pharmaceutical industry. And through that process, I ended up getting an internship, and I learned about rare diseases. And this was truly my calling. This was my path. I wanted to pursue this much more.
And initially, you started a fellowship, which was specifically for medical affairs. Is that right?
Exactly. It's not my current position at all in clinical development. Prior to medical affairs, I had an internship during pharmacy school, actually at Alexion Pharmaceuticals, in this department called medical information. And medical information is a really great calling for pharmacists. I see a lot of transferable skills, whether it be from being in the hospital and having a lot of drug information calls with the whole care team, or maybe patients themselves calling in. that it's very much aligned with the medical information position. And so in that experience, in that summer, I learned about the broader department which medical information falls under, medical affairs. Medical affairs, for those who may not know, is a department that really just works on evidence generation after a product or a medication is already developed and in the market. And so I enjoyed learning about how to go develop phase 4 studies, increase indications, expand the knowledge on a product that may have not been solved when the drug was in development from phase 1 to phase 3. And when I was going through the motions of this, helping to draft protocols for phase 4 studies and helping to talk with HCPs around the globe, I found that I'm really digesting and discussing a lot of top tier publications and research. But as a pharmacist, I was never involved in hands-on research. And so I wanted to go backwards down the funnel of research and development prior to a medication coming to market. And I wanted to get more involved in that. I wasn't sure how. And I was fortunate enough that during my medical affairs fellowship, there was a rotation where I was able to join a clinical development team and support them for a while. And in that moment, I said, this is, I think, my true calling. I really want to be in that phase 1 to phase 3 space of clinical development, taking a product that has a lot of potential for saving patient lives, especially those with rare diseases, and bringing it to those who truly need it.
Oh, that's awesome. Tell us, I mean, I've got so many questions. This is too much. What people will want to know, and I think what would be really valuable, is that you obviously went into a fellowship in medical affairs and then you had a rotation, which specifically helped you to understand what your true calling is, and that you got that experience to say, wow, I love this. I want more of this. Now I need to figure out how to pivot. But if you were currently working in a traditional role, which most people who are going to be listening to this YouTube live or the audio when it goes up onto Spotify, Apple, and wherever you listen to your audio podcasts, how do those individuals start thinking about making that pivot? What could they do that would help them to navigate that transition?
I think my personal opinion is to lean into your transferable skills as much as possible. If you find in your current day-to-day practice that you're very much focusing on a specific therapeutic area, such as infectious diseases, or within the metabolism space, maybe obesity or diabetes, I think that that will be your avenue to more to refine your search more and look for a position maybe in the pharmaceutical industry if that's your end goal that is specifically tailored for that. Oftentimes, I think candidates will try to blast their resume or their CV in multiple different directions, which could potentially work. But I think if you tailor it specifically to what you're currently professional and adept skill set with now, I think that'll be to your advantage in the future.
Okay. And where are these jobs typically advertised, or internships and fellowships that relate to these type of roles? Where are they generally advertised?
I think without a doubt, LinkedIn is probably the most popular space. I have not really used the other job sites such as Indeed, but when I was looking for my fellowship and I was looking for my internship, I did use them in the past. I think they all have their own different advantages. If I can't remember all the functionality of Indeed versus LinkedIn, but being able to refine your search with different filters and being able to tailor different keywords and trigger words that will bring the results to the top of your search list can definitely help. I think, if I remember correctly, also when I was looking for some positions right after pharmacy school, Google has a pretty decent search platform for jobs as well. But that's probably the extent of my understanding of that. Yeah.
Okay. And on a day-to-day basis, what does your role actually involve? And if you go back to when you first started working as a clinical development scientist, like the initial role, what did that initial role involve? And talk a little bit from the skill set side of things. What did you learn in pharmacy school, or what you know about traditional pharmacy careers where you know that skill set easily pivots to this type of opportunity?
That's such an interesting question because I actually struggled to answer that often in the beginning of my career when I started talking with students or other fellows or even residents that are more in the clinical practice space looking to come into the industry. And more specifically, the reason why I had a challenge with that is because I entered my first drug development program right in phase three. There was much of phase two done, all of phase one was done. And so my day to day was very much involved with this protocol that was already developed for a drug program that was acquired. Lexion was able to take in this particular drug candidate by acquiring a different company. And so, so much of the work was in that sense, quote unquote, already done. And so I was basically in the beginning acting like what is referred to as a medical monitor, overseeing the day to day execution of a clinical trial, making sure that the patients receiving the investigational product are safe as best as you can before revealing a blind if the study is blinded, trying to query adverse events and any other issues that may arise from different clinical trial sites around the world. So at that moment in time, it seemed pretty straightforward. It wasn't until there was some communications with the regulatory agencies around the world, whether it be the EMA, in Europe or the FDA in the United States, where there were some unanswered questions with this drug candidate, and they want us to design more phase two studies. Now I'm in a sense going backwards in the drug development pipeline, and my day to day is changing. Now instead of acquiring or inheriting a protocol that's already been written by a different company, we're the ones designing this clinical trial protocol. We're the ones deciding what's the most strategic and clinical way to answer questions that everyone wants answers to. And that's when I started seeing that it's not just logging into a platform, looking at clinical laboratory data, querying adverse events and abnormal lab values and talking to clinical trial sites. Now we're looking at the literature. We're seeing what's yet to be known. We're trying to create this study with very specific aims and objectives. And we're also traveling around the globe to see what would best serve the patient population, what would best serve the prescribers that would eventually have this drug, liaising with not just the clinical development team, but that quote unquote cross-functional team that includes not only pharmacovigilance and regulatory affairs. Naturally, that would be done in this space, but now let's talk to commercial. Let's talk to medical affairs. What do you need later down the road if and when this drug is approved by a regulatory agency?
That is so cool. Just hearing that description makes me feel like that would be really exciting for a pharmacist to get involved with, but also it's just perfect in terms of where we've trained, the scientific nature, the research, the analytical side of things, but also I love that it's quite creative. There's a lot of innovation, thinking outside the box, and you work in rare diseases, so that's even more unique and must be super interesting. And that could be really appealing to a lot of people out there. I guess when you start that role and when you look at career progression, how does that shift for you as you spend, sort of 2 to 3 years versus 5 to 10 years in this area of expertise, and how does the role even evolve? Because obviously the role has evolved for you, which is super exciting. Tell us a little bit about your personal journey, but also, I guess, the generic information that people would want to know.
Definitely. I think I can say this comfortably that there's going to be ambiguity in the beginning when you're defining this new non-traditional role for yourself that's not explicitly laid out as other positions for a pharmacist may be. I was describing earlier in my early journey, my career journey of really enjoying reading the prescribing label when I was in a retail independent setting. I should say independent setting for dispensing and seeing all those fantastic parts of the prescribing label that then melded into the classes that we take: medicinal chemistry, pharmacology, therapeutics. It's almost as if you can take the take away the clinical practice element of the curriculum for a second, dive deep on the academic side. As I mentioned, the biochemistry, pharmacology, medicinal chemistry. Dive deep into that. Like you said, be creative in your role, and you're going to see the day to day change. You're going to see that you're going to have to adapt depending on not only the business needs, but also how the information from the clinical trials arise. If this drug that had a particular hypothesis of how it works, the mechanism of action is being revealed and it's changing and you're learning, you have to adapt with that. And in the beginning, when you're fresh out of, whether it be, college or your fellowship or your residency, it's a lot to take in. But over time, it becomes more natural. It becomes more used to it. I'm on my second drug development program right now, and I've been practicing in this field, in this space, since 2018.
Yeah, so you've been in the space for quite some time now, and it's really exciting to see that you've actually had, different roles within this time and you've been able to progress. And from a leadership perspective, from a project management perspective, there's also a lot of shift in terms of what you've been doing. And I think this type of role is quite exciting to go into in the early stages of your career, not just after having done a residency, being a clinical pharmacist or working in retail pharmacy, because actually that pharmaceutical knowledge, the academic side, the scientific side of information is so fresh. It's something that in retail pharmacy, you might forget a lot of that information or you don't use it on a day-to-day basis. So then when you try to pivot, it's actually quite hard to think of yourself in that environment. But if you're coming fresh out of university or college, I think it would be a great opportunity to feel much stronger when it comes to applications and also interview skills as well, because that knowledge is so fresh in your mind. I don't know if you disagree with that.
I completely agree. And I would even, to your point, say that some of those skills could be lost a little bit when transitioning to the industry and being in the industry for some time. That first drug development program I mentioned that I was on was for a rare disease called Wilson disease, which is a condition of copper toxicity built up in the body, primarily in the liver, but also in the brain. So you have a lot of cases of liver failure. You have a lot of neuropsychiatric issues in this patient population. And so I had to refresh my understanding of not only just general liver metabolism and all of the drugs that we're aware of that can affect that, but just the neuropsychiatric space and what do the treatment guidelines say for how this is managed. And so that was a bit of overlap between two different therapeutic areas. But now the current program I'm in is a rare form of heart failure called cardiac amyloidosis. And so I had to really open the books again, look at the treatment guidelines for all the different kinds of heart failure and refresh my memory on that. But it was a great experience. It was a nice trip down memory lane. And now that I've taken some time and dove deep into it, I'm more comfortable looking at the different regimens that these patients are on in our clinical trials, understanding even the geographical differences, how some countries manage congestive heart failure differently than others, depending on the access to different medicines. And so it definitely, to your point, could go away sometimes, that clinical skill set, but it's a great refresher when you have to jump back into it.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And when it comes to your salary, what are the starting salaries like and how do they increase as you get into the different pathways and career progression?
This is something I love talking about, whether it be with students, fellows, residents, et cetera, or even those who might be in a clinical practice setting or retail setting and they want to transition to the pharmaceutical industry. I think it really depends on your personal preference, which avenue you want to take. There's so many different avenues to take. So if you don't mind, I'll try to briefly and succinctly describe all of them, in my opinion. Without a doubt, I'm sure all the listeners are very familiar with fellowship and residency. I think, again, depending on the geographic location from which you're watching this, let's maybe use the US as an example, you can probably expect to start off somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 a year before taxes. That's without a question. That's a sacrifice you're making coming out of school with an advanced degree or a doctorate, like maybe expecting six figures or higher. But the return on investment is huge. You're taking, like you said, 2 to 3 years to have a pay cut to come out with an incredible, valuable experience that many others may not have. And then you can start getting the earning power that you were hoping for coming out of school. The other avenue or option is to just try and go for an entry level position right out the gate after finishing your university or college experience. And it's higher than fellowship or a residency. You can probably expect, depending on the company, and again, depending on the geographical location, maybe around $75,000 to $90,000. But now we're talking about a different return on investment, a different sacrifice to get to your end goal or your dream goal. Instead of a finite set of time, like a residency or fellowship, 2 to 3 years, now we're talking about creating your own journey, climbing the career ladder, the corporate ladder yourself. And that really depends on obviously your circumstance, your network, but your own eagerness, your own appetite to continue to grow in your career and to continue to climb, and maybe not be in that particular position, but make a lateral move, jump higher for a different department, different position. Um, Definitely a lot of factors involved. But if you want to try and put a ballpark estimate on the time frame from going from entry level to maybe a manager position, so to use specific terms, because we mentioned job searching, LinkedIn, Indeed. So talking about an associate, or maybe some other terms might be specialist, then going to manager right out the gate, that can probably take somewhere between 3 to 5 years, depending on, again, the candidate's eagerness, willing to network, willing to climb that ladder. So those are two broad buckets, really. You have your residency fellowship track, you have your entry level track. To each their own. I have my own opinions about each one. I don't think one is better than the other. I think it really has to be tailored and suited to what the individual is looking for, and of course, what their fiscal needs are. Everyone has different fiscal needs outside of work and how they need to address everything going on in their life.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think from the perspective of benefits, you're seeing a big difference in terms of benefits when you, I guess, compare to a retail position or a hospital pharmacy position. You're looking at competitive rates. You're looking at really good annual leave or holiday pay. You're also looking at working hybrid and potentially doing some of those roles from home a couple of days a week. What does that look like for you? And I guess what are your favorite advantages?
Yes, I can't lie. It was appealing to me in the job process. Aside from all the emotional benefits I described with my career journey and leaning more into the academic side and pharmacology, medicinal chemistry, I definitely saw the income as really a very nice supplement. I saw the benefits as a nice supplement. To answer some of your questions more specifically, I work hybrid. I go into the office 3 times a week. I work from home 2 days a week. I have a generous vacation time. I believe I started off with around 3 or 4 weeks of vacation time and have accrued more over the years. Beyond that, there's also, especially if you're part of a smaller biotech before they're growing to the size of or becoming part of a larger pharmaceutical company, the opportunity to have stock packages and equity in the company. And obviously, if the company does well and they grow, your stock and your equity does well and it grows. Different companies have different terms on that. You can either get all of it at once. You can have it vest over the course of 3 years, 5 years, et cetera, and all those different tactics and strategies to maybe maintain the employee at the company and keep them satisfied from maybe not jumping from company to company. There's great benefits with paternity and maternity leave. I'm currently enjoying paternity leave right now with my second son and my wife, and having the bonding time is fantastic, and I really enjoy it. As you said, opposed to maybe other types of pharmacy practice, I wouldn't have this much time. I get 3 months, which is very nice, very generous. And there's definitely a lot to say about the benefits in this space.
I mean, that's a huge advantage. A lot of those are massive bonuses because when you look at the traditional space, I had a conversation today with another mum who's actually from the US but is here on vacation. She's a family member of mine and she has 2 kids, and she's left pharmacy at this point and retail pharmacy, and one of the main reasons is because of the lack of flexibility, not being able to do a school or a daycare or nursery pickup or drop off because of the hours. And especially a lot of the community pharmacies do extended hours where you're working 10, 11, 12-hour shifts. And it's the same in the hospital. It's really difficult to get flexible roles that allow you to be an involved parent, and you end up spending so much time sending your children to other facilities, or one parent has to make a massive sacrifice and stay at home and be the mum or dad. And though it works, it's not ideal for a lot of people who do want to be home with their kids. I have found that for me, having worked in London and working full time, I was commuting 3 hours a day, and that took away so much of my home experience. And train delays happen, train cancellations happen all the time here in London. Weather causes problems to the train line. So there were so many days where the mornings I would be out the house before the children were awake, and then potentially I would miss out on the evening routine and miss out on the opportunity seeing my kids for potentially 2 or 3 days. And it also burdens my poor husband, who has to then do everything on his own. I have taken a step back from that role, and I'm working locally in my local hospital, still doing paediatrics and still enjoying it, but it's like PRN work, or what we call locum work in the UK. So I just work the hours that work for my lifestyle, and that flexibility has been the biggest game changer for me personally and for my family. It has literally changed my world and turned everything upside down, where I can still enjoy being a pharmacist, but I do it in the time and the hours that suit my life values, my family life, and what it is I actually need to do. I can still spend time with my kids, etc. And I'm home before 5 p.m. every day. I can do the daycare drop off, I can do the school drop off. I'm not rushing around in the morning, and it just feels really good. And having that flexibility from an employer, and I believe in the US, is really hard. And even finding part-time roles can be really challenging. It's pretty good here in the UK. I would say that actually we're doing quite well in comparison to the US from that front. But I think we still have a long way to go when it comes to making it flexible enough to let people have work-life balance, look after themselves. And I'm not talking about just parents here. It's individuals who want to go to the gym or spend time doing a yoga class after work, or meditation, or, going to health appointments, all of those things which are really hard to do, right, when you don't have that flexibility. So that hybrid role sounds really, really good, but you also then have that time at home where you're not wasting it commuting or sitting in a car, spending money on the train, and you've got that home space. So I'm guessing that your routine must feel pretty good right now because you've got a newborn baby at home.
Yes, I'm very grateful. The company's lead is very generous, but very happy to hear that you were able to make that transition too, and have that accommodation. And like you said, even just having the time for self-care is difficult, especially if you're a parent, even if you're not. But and just being in the pharmacist space, it's definitely a challenge. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what life is going to look like for you in the next few years. I mean, I guess, what are your plans? What do you foresee happening for your future in this career pathway?
Sure thing. If you look up my position as a clinical development scientist, which you could also type in medical monitor, you'll see that the roles and responsibilities will be, if you were to assume the day to day, could be pretty routine, pretty regimented, especially if the trial's up and running and off and going. As I mentioned earlier, if the trial's not up and running and off and going, there's a lot of preparation and strategic thinking that's involved. What is even supporting that I have yet to discuss is a lot of translational medicine. And I've been fortunate enough in the last 6 years, 7 years or so to be part of some translational medicine opportunities. So beyond the role of a clinical development scientist or medical monitor, I really want to dive deeper into translational medicine. For some of those listeners who may not be as familiar with that term, a definition that's very simple that I like to think of is bench to bedside. If you have this really great discovery in a animal model, in an in vitro model, in say an ex vivo model, you have a blood sample and you're doing experiments in a blood sample, and you're using different biomarkers and you're seeing these really insightful findings, but you want to know if this translates to a human or or the medication or an outcome with the disease state itself. That's translational medicine. Creating studies and designing different opportunities to capture what would eventually be patient benefit outside of your traditional clinical trial. I think a really high level example is you have a clinical trial, there's an exploratory endpoint, and you see that the end shows this exploratory endpoint trending in a certain direction. And it conceptually or mechanistically, based on the disease of the drug, would be a benefit to the patient, seeing this biomarker go down or go up. And they have resolution of X, Y, and Z symptoms, and it alleviates them with a quality of life score and a certain magnitude. And so, what does that really mean? Can you do a smaller version of that in a more focused setting and try to validate or confirm those findings? And then eventually maybe you can create a diagnostic, you can create a point of care tool. Perhaps you can have a questionnaire or a new disability score, something that would translate to benefiting the patient from bench to bedside. I really enjoy translational medicine. It's a small part of my job, but I would like to maybe expand into that more in the future.
Oh, that sounds awesome. And I mean, there's so much skill set that goes into even that role itself as a pharmacist, and you're constantly evolving as a pharmacy specialist, but in a very unique position. I'm so jealous, to be honest. That sounds really cool. And it sounds like you actually are loving what you're doing from what I'm hearing, and you're really enjoying the space that you're in.
Thank you. I think I am very passionate about my job and my career. A lot of family members joke around about it, friends joke around about it. And I think it's really important. My father taught me this when I was really young to find the balance in a job of what you enjoy and what you have to do. It's a job. And you have a life outside of your job. And that could and should take preference because it's family and all the great things that come with it. But then again, you're spending a lot of time in this other setting. So it should bring a lot of satisfaction, a lot of support in your day to day outside of that. And that's, yeah, that's what I try to aim for.
And it reminds me of what you said earlier in the episode about taking things back to your childhood. And you really understood, you were, making like a mini pharmacy, when not a mini pharmacy, but, thinking about chemistry and creating things. And there's a lot of joy that you experience as a child that then translates to your adult life, but you don't realize in the moment. But when you take a step back and reflect, and that's what's happened with me in podcasting and figuring things out by chance. I gave this podcast a chance because I genuinely like to meet people. I love to have conversation. It was a great opportunity to also connect with individuals during the pandemic, but the biggest picture was teaching my students and giving them the education and the behind the scenes tour of what pharmacists do so they can make the best decisions for their career journeys. But the skill set around podcasting is something that I didn't really know that I would be good at or that I would enjoy. But as a child, I spent so much time enjoying arts and crafts, being creative. Everything in school that related to creativity was where I would spend most of my time. And podcasting is really creative and innovative, and there's so much that goes behind the scenes in designing what a podcast episode is going to look like, or creating the, graphics for my YouTube thumbnails, or designing social media posts, and now getting involved with how to use AI and different tools when it comes to editing and learning video editing, audio editing. It's all very creative, but in a very innovative digital space. I never knew that I would love it as much as I do. And the in-person episodes for me are just a dream. It just feels, it just feels like it's my calling. It's what I'm supposed to be doing day in, day out. And having gone into this, sort of non-traditional pathway, and Pharmacist Diaries as the podcast being the kind of basis for so many other incredible things, like being flown to Germany to create video content for a massive pharmaceutical company. I never dreamed that this would be my reality. So it's really exciting for me to interview someone who's got so much passion, and also it takes you back to your childhood and a lot of it links back. And I say this to my students, and I say this when I speak to pharmacists that I work with who are trying to make a pivot and ask me for advice, is you've got to reflect on the things that bring you joy. It's not necessarily always about what you might be good at in a role, or making sure that you fit all the criteria on an application form or the person's specification that company has created, because you don't necessarily even have to have all of the qualifications. A little enthusiasm and, your personal development will go a long way when it comes to landing a job. But in pharmacy, we're sort of trained to believe that you need to tick all the boxes to even do that application in the first place. And I wanted to ask you about that. When it comes to LinkedIn, there are going to be individuals that pharmacists right now watching this live will start connecting with. They're going to start, I guess, going onto LinkedIn and looking up keywords, and I'll put some of those keywords into the show notes so that people know what to actually type in when it comes to the actual roles. But they will find individuals like you and they will connect with them. But it's really valuable to then send that individual a personalized, direct message. What sort of things would you say to someone who you don't know, who has a job that you potentially think that you might want? And LinkedIn is so powerful when it comes to connections. How do you make that initial conversation? What does that look like for someone?
First of all, I'm so happy that you mentioned having a personal note, because that's one of my own personal rules is if you're going to reach out to someone, you're going to try and build your network or whatnot, to definitely have it resonate with them in some way that shows that you want to have a discourse. You want to be able to continue a conversation and get some additional gain of knowledge. Because if you just send an invitation blindly, I don't think it's going to go very far. But how, it's like you said, how do you do that? It's definitely a challenge. I had to do it a lot and before my fellowship, and I got a lot of rejection. I think that's okay. I thought it's very difficult and it's very discouraging up front, but a lot of people may not want to dive deeper into their network, or they may not want to continue that. And I think that's okay, given what they may be pursuing outside of their career or their job. They may want to do other things in their life. But I think that what's really important is that you try to ground the expectations of what I want to get from this. What can you offer me with your experience? And more often than not, it's difficult. The person that's reaching out doesn't have as much to offer as the person they're seeking advice from or seeking to gain an additional network member from. So I think if you can try to make it as personal as possible, you can try to make it interesting for the other person, where it's not just a very straightforward, simple message that doesn't have a lot of character to it, doesn't have a lot of personality to it. I think that would be beneficial. Because it's definitely difficult, I think, when you're in that position of trying to reach out to someone who may have a lot to offer you, but you don't have as much to offer them. That's just, yeah, it's not an easy task for sure.
I think it takes quite a bit of courage and also practice. No one likes to be rejected and not have, DMs answered. It can feel sometimes a little bit embarrassing that you've reached out to someone and they haven't responded. I really try hard to return messages to everyone who sends me a DM, and that can be overwhelming. There's a lot of messages that come through, but I do my best to get back to everybody. Now, I get a lot of questions about podcasting and kind of the non-traditional pathways, but I have personally created content that allows me to then say, oh, by the way, I have a YouTube video on this, like, boom, here's the link, or join my email newsletter, which, by the way, if you are interested in non-traditional pharmacy careers, I do have a newsletter that you can join where I send you information about all the different career pathways. You get weekly content around when I'm going live for the podcast or when podcast episodes are being released. You also get insight into my life in detail, what I'm doing, what I'm enjoying, how I'm doing it, why I'm doing it, all of those good things, which is amazing. And my newsletter community are wonderful. I respond to a lot of those emails, and it's just really nice to have that personal connection with people. But
you raised such a fantastic point. Sorry to cut you off, but I wanted to try and bring it up in my previous response and wasn't able to. I think if you're reaching out to someone who may have very limited time, whether it be to due to their career or due to their life outside of their career, you can point them in the direction of a resource, such as your fantastic material. I think that would be so helpful for the person that's reaching out, looking to gain more insight or looking to gain more exposure to a field they're trying to break into. It's challenging, it's to say the least. There's so much to discuss. That could have its own episode, breaking in to whatever field or industry you're trying to.
Yeah, but I think it's good to send DMs that are you. They're not the super professional pharmacist version of you. Now, obviously, don't send unprofessional messages, but be yourself, be kind, be personal, and demonstrate that you are a real person that hasn't copied and pasted that same message to 50 other people. Because that goes a long way when people see those messages and they see something maybe unique about how you've contacted them, or maybe something that you've picked up from their profile that was of interest to you, and relating it back to maybe things that you're interested in. That personal touch can go a long way. And once that conversation starts, I think there are opportunities to then say, actually, if you've got 15 to 20 minutes, can we hop onto a virtual call? And people are really, really kind on LinkedIn and do spend time trying to support other people, especially when it comes to career pathways. There are so many calls that I've done, whether it's helping someone with a podcast, a career journey, student life. I spend around maybe at least 10 to 12 hours per month on these calls where I just enjoy conversation, meet people, and try and help. And I'm sure that people do the same, maybe not to the extent that I do with that many number of hours, but, once you get to know somebody, they're more likely to then open up and say, actually, do you know what? I'm going to help you out. Let's jump on a 20-minute call and get the ball rolling, because sometimes opportunities come from DMs. It might be that the next time they have an internship that's being advertised, they know that you're interested, they know that you've got the skill set, they know you're enthusiastic, and boom, they'll send you the link to it that you might not have ever found before. Or they send you an email address to send, your resume or your CV over to that person who's doing the, hiring. There are opportunities that come from LinkedIn that are really unexpected, which can be really great.
That's incredible advice. Yeah, like be kind, be unique. Don't make it just a generic. Yeah, I can't agree more. Yeah.
So when it comes to, and this is my last question, but when it actually comes to the interview and the application stage, have you got any advice for those who are pivoting into this type of career pathway?
Definitely. Going back to what we were discussing earlier, if you have, I think if you're looking to break into this particular space for the pharmaceutical industry, I think if you are able to leverage whatever specialty you're currently practicing in for that role, you're already going to excel beyond the job application pool or that space, that field. And then you're starting to rise to the top of other candidates that may be experts or professionals in that particular therapeutic area or disease state. So how do you go beyond that? I think, like you already mentioned, being kind, being unique in yourself will definitely help you rise to the top, but also asking the right questions and trying to maybe get ahead of the application and see where the position or the role will land in the future. Why is this an unmet need? Why is this role open? What can you do to address any gaps or challenges on the program? What can you bring that to the team that they need? Things like that. Trying to just be a team member before you're part of the team.
Oh, that's awesome advice. I love that. How would they find out what they need before you're even, before you know what they need? How do you figure that out?
I think there's that point in the interview where they say, do you have any questions for us? It's definitely important, don't get me wrong, to ask questions about the role that you're already unfamiliar with so you can understand it better, but then start asking you just about the biggest challenges that they're facing and why this position is being open. What support do they need? Things like that. Because if you can hear the answer and say, I've done that before. I've already solved this in a similar way with a different case or whatever. I think that will help you get ahead of the pack, so to speak.
You kind of flip the script. You have to become a salesperson.
Oh
And
no.
yeah,
It's so funny you say that. When you were talking earlier about all the wonderful things you've manifested with this podcast and how you've also dug into your the early development and childhood interests and aspirations. I wanted to be an educator. I wanted to maybe be a professor, and I saw the benefits that we've discussed with the pharmaceutical industry, and those aligned and said, how can I teach? How can I? Medical affairs is very much focused in education, and so I was kind of like going through those motions in the fellowship. And then I'm like, wait a second, we work very closely with commercial. We work very closely with sales. And this is maybe some, I don't know, controversial advice to those maybe working in medical affairs already, but this is just my take. I think in the past, maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little more, the medical affairs role was very reactive. I think now that we're seeing a minimization of some commercial and sales teams, the medical affairs teams could maybe be more proactive as opposed to reactive with the peer-to-peer discussions and other healthcare practitioners. And so I was like, sales, no, thank you. But I appreciate the compliment. But I was like, no, thanks. I'm a science guy at heart.
I mean, interviews are hard enough, and then boom, at the end, you ask a question and give them the answer that they're looking for. Like, for a lot of pharmacists, I think that would be quite tough because we are quite traditional. We sit through the interview, we answer the questions that we're being asked or being asked of us, but we wouldn't necessarily pitch ourselves. Like, that's so hard to do for most traditional pharmacists. But I love that you raise that because I think it's a really valid point. And I think when you can showcase how you solve problems that they actually have by giving examples of things in the moment and showing that actually this is a really useful question. It's not the type of question that people ask like, oh, when are you going to get back to me, as to when, when am I going to hear back as to whether or not I've got the job, or, what are the other benefits that you get from this role, which sometimes you can find that information on the application or on the website, but you're not necessarily aware of what you could say. That really gives you an opportunity to then showcase who you are. And I guess it takes a lot of courage to do that, but I think it's really valuable. So I love that. We're going to dive into Q&A because I'm excited. Right. I would like to tell you that actually there are currently no questions. People have been enjoying and saying hello, and Mariam said that you've got amazing benefits, and that's exciting. She lives in the UK and currently works as a clinical trials pharmacist. Oh, so if anyone has any questions, they can pop those into the chat. But maybe we might not get any. But in the meantime, I just want to say that I'm super grateful that you have spent some time with me tonight. It's super grateful that you have showcased your story and your journey into pharmacy and this non-traditional pathway. It's been really exciting from my perspective to have you on the podcast on this new series, on my first sort of official YouTube live for the Pharmacist Diaries podcast. So that is cool. That's a memory that we're going to share together. And I always, once I have individuals onto the podcast, we're friends for life now, Adam. So we'll continue to obviously stay in touch. And I'd love to continue to know what happens with your career journey and where you actually progress going forward. But there's no questions at the moment, which is a shame because I was really excited. Come on, guys.
Oh, no worries. I mean, likewise, I'm grateful and honored to be part of this. I've seen a lot of your content before and just happy to be here. So, and like you said, I think it's important to be kind and unique when reaching out and with your network. So happy to speak to anyone who may be seeking help or advice or anything I could offer in that fashion.
Oh, that's super kind. And I think that's really generous of you because once we end stream and a lot of people listen to this episode, you may get some new connections. You may have people reach out to you to ask for advice. So that would be really great if I could share your LinkedIn profile and we take it from there. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming on today's podcast.
Thank you for having me.